Alright, so the first thing officially I have to do, of course, is to put on my seatbelt. I need everybody else to put on the seatbelt. No seatbelts for you, just for me. Okay. Next bit of safety information I have to do, of course, is that this is a kneeling bus, which means every time I stop the bus, I'm going to kneel down the front end. And of course, before I can go anywhere, of course, I have to raise it back up again. The next bit of safety information, of course, is the fact that we have emergency exits on the roof, one in the front and one in the back, and along the windows wherever you see a red handle. But those are only necessary if we have a water landing. And we only have a water landing if we go over the side. And I have no intention of going over the side, right? And everybody's crossing themselves. I'm not Catholic, hey, what can hurt, right? So, the next bit of safety information is that the ground is very uneven, and we've got added benefit today. We have ice on the trails, too. So, the best rule of thumb is to take your time walking to and from the Grand Canyon, because it's always a lot nicer to sightsee uninjured as opposed to injured, right? So, the ground is very uneven and icy, so if you take your time to see the Grand Canyon, everything will work out great, because the Grand Canyon is at least 6 million years old, and it will be here even if you have to wait an extra 15-20 minutes before you go see it. So, that's a good rule of thumb about the whole tour. The next bit of safety information is that there aren't or isn't a railing along the whole rim of the Grand Canyon. So it's a good rule of thumb to stay at least a body length from the edge of the Grand Canyon at all times, because if not, you might end up in this book here. It says over the edge, death in the Grand Canyon. We have an actual average death rate here of about 7 people a year. Most of them are from falls, but last year we got the gold medal because last year we had 36 people die here in the Grand Canyon. So, in all seriousness, please be careful at all times, and then we can all come back and enjoy the aftermath after we've seen the Grand Canyon, right? So, and a lot of people ask, how often people fall into Grand Canyon? Well, usually just once. That's usually all it takes, right? But they also say if you ever do fall into Grand Canyon, and keep your eyes open, because it's really pretty on the way down. That's not much consolation either, I understand, but that's just the way things are. I myself have worked in 8 national parks, and unfortunately there have been mishaps in all of them, just from natural occurrences. The train you came in on was originally brought up here to help out with the mining industry, but later it was found it was more practical and more probable to help out with the tourist industry. The Great Big Hotel we pass on the right back over there is the nicest place here, called the El Tabar. And when it was completed in 1905, it was considered state-of-the-art. Because at that time in our nation's history, and probably in the rest of the world for that matter, most people were using oil lamps to light their homes. And if they wanted to visit the privy or outhouse, they had that at the back of the house. Whereas you see this particular building back here, the hotel had electric lights in every room and a bathroom in every room. And for that reason, that's why it was considered state-of-the-art. It got its power from this great big stone building to our left right here. At one time, that had steam-powered generators. At the moment, is a warehouse, and eventually it's supposed to be turned into a museum. The hotel, a lodge over here to the right, where the trucks are parked in front of them right now, that is the main place I'll be dropping you folks off after the tour, because there are 4 places to eat in there, and there are 2 gift shops, and it's an easy walk up the hill to the El Tamar. And the El Tamar is also one of the few places I can't drive the bus to because the front of the hotel is too narrow for the bus to turn around in, so if you need to go to the El Tamar, you need to get off at the Bright Angel Lodge. As we're coming down the hill, you'll see these red cabins to our right. Those red cabins are, of course, where you would spend the night if you stayed at the Bright Angel Lodge. Out of those cabins right there, 8 of them line the rim of the Grand Canyon, and out of those 8, 4 of them have a fireplace, and 1 of them is the Bucky O'Neill cabin, which is the oldest structure on the south rim. This trail right here to our right is where the morning mule wranglers take folks up to a little stone corral at the top of the trail there, and that's where they take folks down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon by way of the most popular trail in the park called the Bright Angel Trail. If you look to your right, you get your first official look at what some call the most spectacular geological formation in the world, otherwise known as... You got it! What you're basically looking out over there across the way, of course, is the north rim of the Grand Canyon, which is about 10 miles on average away. But if you want to get there, if you don't have an airplane or a helicopter or a rocket pack, is you have to drive, and it takes like 5 hours to get there. The top layer of the Grand Canyon is tan rock. You see in a number of places right here. This tan rock, of course, is Kaibab limestone, which is on average about 350 feet thick and is about 270 million years old. And of course, like I said, it's the top layer of the Grand Canyon. Most scientists say that there are roughly about 37 rock layers in the Grand Canyon. And but some scientists now are starting to say that there are 70 rock layers. So, in just a moment, you'll be able to see a rock wall, which is, of course, part of the Kaibab limestone. We have some music. Somebody be singing for us? Okay, well, if you can turn off all musical devices, that would be very helpful. If you look to the right here, we have this stone wall, which is all Kaibab limestone. You can see in some places where these vertical lines are, and in those vertical lines where at one time they stuck in dynamite to blow this apart to create the road that we're traveling on. This rock wall is roughly about 10 feet high, and you have to envision that the rest of the Kaibab limestone extends below this road roughly 340 more feet. Like I said, that is the top layer of the Grand Canyon. And if you were to hike down into the Grand Canyon, they say for every foot that you descend down into the Grand Canyon, whether you're using your rocket pack or you're walking, hiking, or maybe if you're riding on the mules, they say for every foot that you descend down into the Grand Canyon, you're going back in time roughly 50,000 years. If you were to hike or travel all the way to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and get to the base layer of the Grand Canyon, that is a metamorphic rock and is also a remnant of an ancient mountain range. Its age is between 1.8 and 2 billion, with a B that is, years old. Roughly half the age of the whole planet. And it goes by the name of Vishnu Schist. I'm not schisting with you. Or I schist you not, right? And did you know that before the astronauts went to the moon, they came to the Grand Canyon? Have you ever heard the names Buzz Aldrin or Neil Armstrong?
Yes.
Well, they were here in 1965, as well as the late John Glenn. And you see, they all came here to study geology, and originally this didn't sit well with the astronauts, because, you see, they were ordered by their commanding officers to study geology. And like I said, this didn't sit well with the astronauts originally, because at this time the astronauts thought, according to the article I'm reading about it, they thought that all geologists were nerds. And they said we're anything but nerds. We're the guys with the right stuff. We're the best test pilots and the best fighter pilots in the world. So we're anything but nerds. And their commanding officer said, don't matter, fellas. You still got to study geology. And he said, well, why is that? And they said, well, when you get to the moon, you've got to have something to compare the moon rocks with before you get there. And there's no better place in the United States, let alone on the planet, to study geology than that. You got it, the Grand Canyon. So, most of them came here, most of them started hiking around, and most of them hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. You know what's one of the first things they discovered at the bottom? That nobody brought any beer. No, I'm just kidding. That their legs were tired, yes. That's because the hike all the way down is about 9.5 miles. And that's quite a distance to hike, well, whether in good shape or not. And then, of course, they say it takes 3 times as much energy to come out of the Grand Canyon as it does to go into it. So, they were even tireder when they came out. And so, they all hiked back out again, and after that, they all went to the moon. So maybe if you do it, we can call you an astronaut too. So, in all the time that the Grand Canyon existed, it's now been studied by scientists for about 150 years. And in all that 150 years, the scientists have come up with this acronym, which they've taught us, that I'm going to explain to you to show you how the Grand Canyon came into existence. And that acronym is rather appropriate for where we are, because it's the word dude. And that's because we have dudes working on dude wrenches, right? Where the first letter in the word dude stands for deposit or deposition. And the scientists say the deposits laid down in this area to create the rock strata or rock layers of the Grand Canyon was done so between about 270 million years and 1 billion years. And that came from various environments as forests, grasslands, deserts, swamps, jungles, mountaintops, even under the water. Does anybody know where limestone comes from? It actually comes from beaches. So if we were doing this tour like 100 million years ago, we could call the tour the Yellow Submarine Tour. Because we'd be under the water. We could see things maybe like whales swimming by. I'm hoping for the Loch Ness Monster or maybe mermaids myself. But that's just me. So, the second letter in the word dude is U, which stands for uplift. And that's what the scientists say, that the entire Earth's crust is broken up into all these plates, sort of like an enormous jigsaw puzzle. And when these plates slide past each other, like they do in California, they can create the fault line of the San Andreas Fault. And when these plates slam into each other, like they do in the Rocky Mountain area of the country, they create mountain ranges. And in this particular instance, the scientists say between about 70 and 75 billion years ago is when at that time the North American plate collided in a way with the Pacific plate. And at that time, the Pacific plate went underneath and the North American plate went on top. And that's because the Pacific plate was heavier, because it was denser, because it was saturated with water. Also, that helped create the Colorado Plateau, if you've ever heard of that. Then, the second D in the word dude stands for down cutting. And that's where the scientists say that the main carving force of the Grand Canyon, the Colorado River, first arrived in this area, doing the gouging and the cutting that it still does to this day. And finally, the last letter in the word dude is E, which stands for erosion. And the scientists say through snow and rain, rock slides, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and even the wind, has slowly carved the Grand Canyon you've come to see today. So, if anybody ever asks you how the Grand Canyon was formed, what are you going to say? Okay. This is our first stop, which is supposed to be just for buses, but I guess some people can't read.